What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Trojan Dash. You know the deal. It's not officially Trojan Dash without some technical difficulties. Apologies for the 3-minute delay, but we are back as we are going to be every week from now on for the end of the season. USC is in crunch time, as is the title of this show. So we figured we would need to bring you the content every single week. And we've got a lot of basketball to talk about. USC so rude of me. And are we back? Did we get the stream again? All right, I think we are good to go. I don't know how much of the last minute and a half you guys saw, but let me re-prompt Anthony. Anthony, you can give that whole spiel all over again. Give me your biggest pros and cons from the Arizona and the Oregon USC basketball games.
Yeah, okay, so I think we are live. But yeah, so in terms of the cons, I'll make it quick. But, against Arizona and Oregon, they weren't really able to guard the perimeter. That was the reason why I think they lost against Oregon against Arizona. But they really weren't able to guard the three-point line, which can be trouble. And against Arizona, a huge con was they just got outworked. And it was pretty ironic because they had no Isaiah Mobley against Oregon, and they were still able to get a hold in the rebounding category. So it's a little bit disheartening to see that. I think against Arizona, they kind of were just out of it, getting outworked and getting more complacent and just feeling like they could steamroll over them. But a main pro that I really saw in terms of both games, but especially the Oregon game, was Taj Edey. His performance, I've measured it many times. I've been his biggest fan throughout all of this season, but I think he's probably the most consistent scorer now on USC. I mean, Evan Mobley has some quiet games, but Taj Edey seems like every time he always steps up. And in terms of quiet games for Evan Mobley, like some people for quiet, it might be like 4 points. For him, it's like 12 points. But in terms of consistency, I think Taj Edey is the one. He's carried them out throughout many games, and Oregon was just another example. That was the main pro I saw from that. And also, they were able to hold off a good run. I think Oregon cut it down about 10 points with a few minutes left. And they were able to maintain their lead. So that's a huge pro. But in terms of cons, you got to figure out how to guard the perimeter. I'm pretty sure we'll talk about that later in the show.
Yeah, Taj Edey has just been incredible. I mean, that start that he got off to against Oregon, where he hit 3 threes in the first 2 minutes and scored USC's first 9 points and helped them get out to I think it was a 17-0 lead. I mean, that was just incredible. And the way, as you said, he's probably been their most consistent scorer on the year. But I want to talk about another pro, and that's Drew Peterson, right? Drew Peterson was omitted from the starting lineup on Monday because Andy Enfield simply said he had to play better. He was, I might be botching the numbers here, but I believe he was 16 for 54 from the field over his previous 8 games. That's just under 30%, like 29.4, 29.6, something around that, averaging 6 points per game. And he's been, on the whole, he's been one of USC's better 3-point shooters on the year, and he's been sort of that, third, fourth, fifth option kind of guy who's been really, been able to provide some valuable minutes for this team. But obviously over the last couple of weeks, it hasn't quite been his, best play. And I think seeing him get back, contribute 15 points off the bench, hit, I think, two of 4 threes, shoot 50% from the field. He said he got his confidence back, which was awesome to see. So that was obviously a great sign. I think one of the other pros is they were more physical again. And that was, I think, one of their biggest problems against Arizona, which is that this is a team that should not lose the rebound battle to pretty much anybody, right? And Arizona is not a particularly big team. We were watching the broadcast, and they were saying at pretty much every position USC has the size advantage there, right? And they lost the rebound battle something like 36-26. So that was obviously great to see them get back with a 39-26 rebound margin over Oregon. But I want to get into some of the cons and specifically from the Oregon game, because I think it's easy to pick out the cons from the Arizona State game. They weren't guarding the 3 well. They weren't being physical enough, blah, blah, blah. The offense kind of stalled at some times. But to be honest, I wasn't too worried about that game because Arizona shot like 47% from 3. USC shot like 35%. Isaiah Mobley had 7 points, which wasn't a great game for him. And one of those three of those points was from like a garbage time 3-pointer inside of a minute that he would never take. So he really effectively had like 4 points, shot like 2 for 7 from the field, something like that. And I just don't see that happening very much again. So I wasn't too concerned about that. It just seemed like one of those nights where it just wasn't their game. And they only lost by 9. When you factor in the way that Arizona shot the 3 ball, they only lost by 9 points. Not the end of the world there. But from the Oregon game, I saw something that I kind of saw in the Arizona game too. It seems like Evan Mobley, against some of the bigger centers and forwards in the Pac-12, he has kind of some trouble getting positioning down low, right? And you kind of see him get sort of thrown off his game in the paint, and he only scored 11 points on the game. He obviously had a massive second half against Arizona, but you saw in the first half against them, he only had like 2 or 3 points. And it was because oftentimes he struggled to get positioning down low. And when you have a guy like Taj Edey who's scoring the way that he was, you have Drew Peterson backing him back up. You know, you don't need Evan Mobley to be scoring 21, 22, however many points it was in the second half against Arizona. You don't need that against Oregon, but that's going to be one of the things that, I mean, I always talk about when they play bigger, when they play better teams in the Pac-12 tournament in March Madness. They're going to need to figure out a way to get their best player going, but have him do so the entire game. Because, you know, I always say USC needs guys to back him up. It can't just be him and then a bunch of guys trying to make him as good as humanly possible. We know that he's going to be good, and if he's not, bigger, better teams are going to find a way to isolate him and sort of, you know, if they bring him down, then USC can fall with him. So that, again, it's not a huge concern for me because he still finds a way to, you know, put some nice moves on some guys down low. And, you know, I don't think it's going to be a huge problem going forward. I just would like to see a little bit more of that against Colorado. But we're already 11 minutes into the show. It feels like we've only been talking about it for 8 minutes because we have. So let's get on to the next game for USC. They're traveling to Boulder this Thursday for a 6 p.m. matchup against the Buffaloes. These teams matched up on New Year's Eve. Buffaloes won by 10. A lot has changed for both teams. Namely, I think USC's gotten a lot better. Colorado has gotten a little bit worse. Anthony, what do you expect from USC Colorado tomorrow night from Boulder?
Yeah, I think it's for sure a huge clash. I think in terms of USC, I think they're going to come out and go out for vengeance. That was really the thing that I got when they played Oregon, obviously, and a lot of people talked about it, or Drew Peterson in specific talked about it after the game. They wanted to come out and be more energized and just get back on track. I think that's what they're going to want to do against Colorado. They lost against Colorado on New Year's Eve, like you said. It was a winnable game. I think they won about like 3-4 minutes without scoring, and they were still in it. They could have easily won the game. And Colorado is a team that's, you know, they're not at the top of the Pac-12, but they're not average. They're just sort of in the middle. They're a really great team. They've got some great players. McKinley Wright is a baller, and they've got some really cool forwards, Jariah Horn and Evan Beatty, who can give Evan Mobley and Isaiah Mobley, if he plays, some trouble. I do think USC is going to handle this matchup, though. And, you know, I was telling you about this before, but Colorado is now a 2.5-point favorite, which for my betting friends is a perfect money line. I think USC is going to take them out. I think they're going to handle it. It's going to be a huge win for them, in my opinion. But this is what I'm really going to want to see is Ethan Anderson going to stay in the lineup with McKinley Wright? Because the first game they played, he obviously wasn't playing. So I think that could be a huge difference. But I really do fully expect USC to come out and just take them out and get the game going and try to stay in control, because if you lose 2 games to Colorado in the Pac-12, it's not going to look that good in terms of seeding, and it's not going to be a huge momentum boost going into the more important games in March. So I think they're going to come out and try to be more aggressive early on and get out to an early lead, try to just handle the game as best as they can. Obviously, it's not going to be easy. Colorado was never an easy beat, but I think that they'll be able to do it, and it'll be a huge win on the road in it's a much-needed win, too, to kind of get some morale boost. If you lose this game, that's 2 in the last 3 when they hadn't even lost 2 in the last 15 before that. So it's going to be an important game, and I do fully expect that they'll take the win.
Yeah, so as far as McKinley Wright goes, I mean, first of all, he terrifies me. The dude is a walking bucket, but this is one of those games where I see guys like Isaiah White playing a pretty big role, because he's one of those guys, one of those bigger guys that can guard pretty much any position on the floor. Wright's got a good combination of size, but like shiftiness, agility. Seems like he can create space pretty well, and it seems like Isaiah White is one of those guys who knows how to swarm, you know, some of those shiftier, more agile scorers, and I think that he could be really effective in stopping Wright. But from a team standpoint, this is something that, you know, some of the guys, I think Coach Enfield and then, I forget exactly. I think it was Taj Edey, maybe Drew Peterson, were talking about in the post-game press conference after the Oregon game. They were saying how it's always tough to go to Colorado because of the altitude. It's sort of when you're playing a game like basketball, as high paced as fast paced as it is, and the way that the Trojans play it too. It's always a challenge there. So I think I kind of want to see Enfield use more guys. It seems like he's been going with the 7 or 8 man squad for most of these games. I would like to see him, sort of rotate guys in there a lot. And like you said, they need to start off with energy. They need to start off hot, because that was what brought them down against Arizona. And Edie was saying after the Oregon game that that's something that they really focused on. That's sort of what contributed to their 17-0 start, things like that. And I think that that's necessary too, but I also think it's important for USC to sort of pace themselves and say, okay, this is a game that we really need to play a full 40 minutes of basketball, right? And we've seen how late runs, early offensive stalling, things like that can bring this team down. And I think when you do that against a team like Colorado that has scorers like McKinley, right, it can really hurt you. So yeah, they need to come out of the gate with energy. They need to come out of the gate strong. But at the same time, I don't really want to tire themselves out. I don't really want them to tire themselves out in the first 5 minutes, something like that, because then you have 35 minutes of McKinley Wright giving you 30 points, right? So that's something that I'm definitely going to be watching. I want to see them use more guys. But I do think that they're going to handle this game. One thing that I've sort of appreciated about this USC team is that they seem to win the big games. And I get it. Every game down the stretch is a big game. So Arizona was a big game when they didn't win that big game. But I'm talking about the games like Oregon, when you're right up there with, they both entered that game with 3 losses in the Pac-12, tied with UCLA for the fewest in the conference. They needed to win that game. And if they didn't win that game, they still had a chance at the Pac-12 regular season title, but it was going to be a lot tougher. They come out and they win that game. This is another one of those games, too, is sort of I guess you could say a trap game. Colorado's probably too good to really call it a trap game, but this is sort of one of those games where you think they're just sort of getting back on the right track. They just had a big win against Oregon. They're sort of closing in on the Pac-12 title. Like, it always felt real, but now they, control their own fate. They, they have it all laid out there for them, and they can go and take it. And this feels like one of those games where it's like you don't want them to have a letdown. And I don't think that this team does that. So I do also think that USC is going to take care of business in Boulder. I think it's going to be a tight game just because they have so many playmakers and so many guys that can, score and score fast and score a lot, and sort of go on big runs like they might need to if they're down by 10 in the second half or something like that. It did, going back to the Oregon game too, it did kind of concern me that game was, 21 points at halftime. It was 43-22, I think. And Oregon cut it to 10. It never felt like they were going to lose that game, but that game probably shouldn't have been as close as it was, around the 3, 4, 5 minute mark there. But right around, I think, just over 3 minutes, you had Max Agbong-Polo hit that big. This is the kind of thing that this team does, right? When they start to see games sort of slipping away, they seem to be pretty effective at answering like that. And so I think that if they can do that, and they can sort of stick with the winning big games theme that I've been talking about, I think they're going to prove me right tomorrow.
Yeah, Colorado you can't take them lightly because they'll jump on you. I think, like you talked about McKinley, right? He's just an outstanding player, an outstanding creator. And I think I'll be very interested to see how Enfield approaches that and the altitude as well. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes 10-man rotation. And one thing to really watch is Evan Mobley's minutes. Obviously, Evan Mobley is 19 years old. He can play 40 minutes if he wants to, but that's not what you want. You don't want to tire him out. And I think the previous game, or either against Arizona or Oregon, I don't recall, but he played about 36 minutes, which is insane. And if Isaiah Mobley's playing, I think they need to kind of lay off on the minutes for Evan Mobley, especially in the altitude, kind of switch it up, run more lineups with Chavez Goodwin and Isaiah Mobley just to switch it up, and give him some rest. But Colorado is a dangerous team. They're third in the Pac-12. It's not like we're talking about a bottom-tier Pac-12 team. Yeah. So it's going to be a huge challenge. But I really do expect to see them come out and just be energized and try their best to just wrap it up quickly and just get a good lead. It's going to be important. This Colorado team they don't care. They just keep fighting, and they've had some big wins this season. Obviously, it's been more up and down for them since they beat USC, but they're still a dangerous team. And I think the first matchup we saw it when USC goes on scoring droughts. This is a team that can still just keep going and keep going. And they're a great offensive team. And McKinley Wright really, he reminds me of, not because of, like his size or anything, but he gives me LeBron James vibes just because he's a playmaker. He does it all really. I mean, I think he's one of the only, I think he is the only player with 2,000 points, 500 rebounds, and 500 assists in the Pac-12 in one career, which is ridiculous. So this is a team that can't take lightly, but I fully expect, like you said, for USC to just take them out.
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched on this too. I think I also expect a really hungry Colorado team, right? I've seen, Colorado is probably going to make March Madness, but it's not like a sure thing. It seems like they're still sort of playing their way in, and if they pick up a big win against a team like USC and they go 2-0 against, a team like the Trojans that projects to be somewhere around a 4 or 5 seed, that pretty much all but puts them into the tournament. So definitely, like you said, not a game that they can take lightly. This is still a good team, even if they aren't quite playing at the level that they were playing at on New Year's Eve. But March Madness, we're sort of leading into the conversation right now. There's still a lot for this USC team to accomplish. Obviously they're going to make the tournament, right? But right now they have 3 losses in the Pac-12, tied with UCLA, 1 ahead of Oregon. Seems like it's pretty much a 2 or 3 team race. I think this is an important note. USC, assuming there are no more schedule changes, cancellations, the Pac-12 just added a bunch of games on Monday before the Oregon game. If everything goes the way that it's supposed to go right now, USC is going to finish the season with 20 games, UCLA with 19 games, Oregon with 18. And what that means is that in the case of any tie between USC and any other team in the loss column, USC is going to have the tiebreaker, on the winning percentage, because they're going to have that one extra game and presumably that one extra win if they're obviously tied in the loss column. So this is still within USC's grasp. Like they're very much in the driver's seat. It's probably more likely than not that they're going to win the Pac-12 unless, some bad things happen, which of course they could. But between the Pac-12 regular season crown, the Pac-12 tournament, and March Madness, Anthony, lay out for me what you think a successful finish to this USC season would look like.
Yeah, well, the main thing is free throws, and I'll let you touch upon the free throws because we all know that they're one of the worst. I think it was like 310th last time I checked. I didn't even know there were that many schools that play college basketball. It's crazy to think about. But outside of free throw shooting, I think something that's going to be important is, can they get other people involved? It's been really the Evan Mobley and the Tajidi show for the entire season, basically. Can they get Drew Peterson into more of a rhythm? Because when he's in a rhythm, this USC team is pretty dangerous. And I think the last game he had a double-double, which was great to see. And he stepped up, and coming off the bench might be the right move. And obviously getting Ethan Anderson, who hasn't been in double figures since that UCLA game, getting him more involved. Obviously, he's not a scorer, but getting those 2 guys involved is going to be really important because this USC team, if they get more into rhythm, specifically Drew Peterson gets into more of a rhythm, it's going to be trouble. And obviously Isaiah Mobley, who we've talked about, he's got to get more accustomed to on the offensive end and get more aggressive. Because that's really a game changer. I mean, that just elevates their team and elevates their chances to such high levels. I mean, they could easily make it, and we talked about it last week, so they could easily make it to a Sweet 16 or Elite 8 just if those players pop off. And one thing that I kind of noticed against Oregon was they were running a lineup with just Evan Mobley as the big man. I think it was might have been Tajidi, Ethan Anderson, Drew Peterson, Isaiah White, or Max Agbampolo, and Evan Mobley, and it worked really well. And I think that's one thing that if Andy Enfield could switch around, see if that could work, that might be a huge game changer going into March tournament to give them more momentum because that's hard to guard. You got 4 basically guards, and then you got Evan Mobley in the middle. And if they're hitting their shots, that's another thing. They got to figure out this perimeter shooting problem. We have Noah Ballman off the bench, but he's not getting enough minutes to really get in a rhythm. So it's really up to players like Tajidi and Drew Peterson to get more accustomed to shooting, and obviously Ethan Anderson, who was shooting lights out, and then now he's kind of come back to earth. So it's going to be important to kind of establish rhythm for those other players, figure out some type of lineup changes, obviously a rotation. You're not going to be going 10-man rotations into the tournament. And of course, if you want to do a little bit more free throw practicing, I know you'll touch upon that, but obviously free throw shooting and perimeter shooting is going to be super important. But one thing I want to pay attention to is, will Andy Enfield run for more of that four-man lineup? Will he try to mix it up? Because that's going to give them a lot of momentum and really switch up the defenses. And the more versatile you are on the offensive end, the more difficult you are going to be beat. So that's going to be important to see what happens. But, yeah, those are the things that I'm intrigued to see going into March.
Yeah, I think you obviously touched on the free throw shooting, as we've done many times throughout this show's history. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Free throw shooting might be what makes or breaks this team as far as how deep they're going to go in the Pac-12 tournament and March Madness, things like that, because these games are going to be close. And if you're going 50% from the field and you're leaving, 10 points on the glass right there, you're not going to win a lot of close games. But I want to break down the Pac-12 regular season race, the conference tournament, and March Madness, because to me, it seems like at this point, if USC doesn't win the regular season championship, which is like technically the official Pac-12 championship, how it's decided, something like that. If they don't win the regular season title, I think it would be pretty disappointing at this point. Obviously, maybe not looking back on the season as a whole, because this team was expected to be good, but I don't know. You can never really expect USC to win the Pac-12, regular season title, right? But now that they're in control of their own destiny, they're pretty much in the driver's seat. I think at this point it would be pretty disappointing if they did not do that. Obviously, they have to beat UCLA. It pretty much comes down to that game. And if they do win that game, which I think they have a pretty good shot of winning, they're going to have one fewer loss between all those games than UCLA and Oregon. And remember, they win any tiebreaker in the loss column, so they would have to lose two more games. And if they do that, they utterly collapse down the stretch. I think it'd obviously be pretty disappointing. And if they were to lose that UCLA game against a team that they beat earlier in the season, that would be disappointing as well, especially if the conference comes down to that. So at this point, yeah, they pretty much have to win the regular season title for the reasonable Trojan fan to be satisfied. My hot take of the day is that I really don't care about the Pac-12 tournament. I just don't care. It does not matter to me. It's not technically how the conference championship is determined. It's so random, right? You could see, USC could definitely win the whole thing. They could also, get into a second round matchup with a team like, Oregon State, who they lost to, or a team like Arizona, whom they lost to, and see an early exit there. They're in the tournament. They obviously don't need the automatic qualifier. I just don't care. If they win the regular season title, and they're already in March Madness, which they are, I'm pretty much going to be viewing the Pac-12 tournament as basically a tune-up and, a chance for them to get a higher seed, maybe push them from a 4 to a 3 or a 5 to a 4 or something like that. Obviously, if they get a first-round exit there, completely embarrass themselves going into March, whoever's doing the rankings or the, seeds, whatever, is not going to like that. But no, I'm not going to lose sleep over USC not winning the Pac-12 tournament. That is assuming they win the regular season title. And then I think when we get to March, they obviously got to win the first round, got to win the second round. Once you get to the Sweet 16, I would like to see them get to the Elite Eight. If they don't do that, I'm not going to say it's an utter catastrophe, but I think win the Pac-12 tournament. Win the Pac-12 regular season title, get to at least the Sweet 16, preferably the Elite Eight, and I'm calling it a successful conclusion to the Trojan season. What do you think?
Yeah, well, technically, even if they win the regular season title, it'll be a success, because the last time they won a regular season title was 1983. Trojan Dash, none of this even existed. There was no Twitter. So think about that for a second. So I think I do agree with you, though. I think if they lose in the tournament, really no big deal. How many? Do you even know who won? Well, there was no tournament last year, but does anyone ever remember who won the tournament? No, it's always the regular season. That's really all that matters. The only reason I would want them to play in the tournament was, like you said, a tune-up, just to get, not in not get rusty or anything, be prepared. But they lose in the first round, and that scenario is not good. But I do agree with what you're saying. I think a regular season title for sure success, and if they go towards the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, I'm fine with that. Just no first round, second round exits, because they have the potential to go far.
Yeah, and those are all definitely going to be intriguing storylines to watch. And as you now know, Anthony and I are going to be here breaking it down every single week for the remainder of the season. But for now, that's going to do it for this edition of Trojan Dash. Thank you to everybody, as always, for tuning in. As a reminder, make sure to follow us on all our various social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you know it. Check out all of our great work at dashsports.tv. Check out our exclusive comms with Sports Pac-12. Anthony does one on USC men's basketball over there. Make sure to check out his awesome work, retweeted by Isaiah Mobley.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Isaiah, if you're watching this, man, I really appreciate it. I doubt you are, but that was great, man. I'm telling
Anthony,
you, I knew he did that. I knew he read it before he played that game. I could just tell it was something different, the way he was moving and everything. Oh, man.
I love the confidence. Anthony, congrats on being big time. Everybody, make sure to tune in every week to help this show get big time as well. Until then, that's going to do it. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.